In this video, let us understand Sharpe versus Sortino ratios. So, today we will be answering a critical question for any investor. How do you really know if your portfolio is performing well? A high return is great, but it's only half the story. The other half is risk. In this video, we're putting two of the most important performance metrics head to head. The classical Sharpe ratio versus the refined cousin, the Sortino ratio. By the end, you will exactly know how they work, which one to use, and how to calculate them yourself in Python. Let's start with a simple scenario. Imagine two portfolios. Which one would you choose? Portfolio A has 25% return last year and portfolio B has a 15% return last year. Which one would you choose? Portfolio A looks like a no-brainer, but what if I told you portfolio A's journey was wild, a stomach-churning roller coaster, while portfolio B grew slowly and steadily? Suddenly, the choice isn't clear. This is the fundamental problem. Raw returns don't tell the whole story. We need a way to measure a risk-adjusted return. How much bang did we get for a buck? Or in this case, how much return did we get for the amount of risk we took? This is where performance ratios come in. The most famous metric for this is the Sharpe ratio, developed by the Nobel laureate William F. Sharpe. The formula looks a bit technical, but the idea is simple. It measures your excess return, that is, your portfolio's return minus the risk-free rate per unit of total risk, where the risk is measured by standard deviation or volatility. So let's use the bumpy road analogy once again. Think of your investment as a road trip. The return is how fast you reach your destination. The volatility is how bumpy and uncomfortable the road was. The Sharpe ratio gives you a score for the quality of the ride. A high Sharpe ratio means you had a fast and a smooth ride. Low Sharpe ratio means it was a very bumpy journey for the speed you were going. But the Sharpe ratio has a flaw. It treats all volatility as bad. Massive, unexpected price jump upward is a good thing for you, but it increases the volatility and actually lowers your Sharpe ratio. That doesn't feel right, and that's exactly why the Sortino ratio was created. The Sortino ratio is a smarter version of the Sharpe that only focuses on harmful volatility. The formula is almost identical, but instead of dividing by total volatility, we divide by downside deviation. This is the key difference. Downside deviation is just the standard deviation of the negative returns. It completely ignores the returns that were positive. Now let's try a fair weather analogy. The Sortino ratio is like the performance review that only considers your mistakes. It completely ignores all the times you did an amazing job and focuses only on how often and how much you underperformed. It's the perfect metric for an investor whose main goal is to avoid losses. Now let's put them up side by side. The Sharpe ratio measures your return against all the bumps in the road, good and bad. The Sortino ratio measures your return against only the bad bumps. The key question for Sharpe is, did I get enough return for the total volatility? The key question for Sortino is, did I get enough return for the downside risk I took? All right, now let's see this in action. We're going to compare two very different stocks to see how the ratios stack up. We'll use a formerly volatile growth stock, Tesla, and a stable blue chip stock, Johnson & Johnson. First, we pull in the 5 years of daily price data and calculate the log returns. Now, we will define two functions, one to calculate the annualized Sharpe ratio and one for the Sortino ratio. The key part of the Sortino function here is where we filter for only returns that are less than zero before calculating the standard deviation. Okay, now let's look at the results. We calculate this assuming a risk-free rate of 2%. And the results we got are the Sharpe ratio for Tesla is 0.768 and the Sortino for it is 1.0816. The Sharpe ratio for Johnson & Johnson is 0.0303 and the Sortino for it is 0.420. So, did you notice how for Tesla, the Sortino is significantly higher than its Sharpe because Tesla has massive price swings in both directions. The Sortino ratio ignores all those huge upward spikes, giving us a better sense of the return generated per unit of bad risk. For Johnson & Johnson, a more stable stock, the two ratios are much closer together because it doesn't have the same extreme upside volatility. So, we come back to our original question. Which ratio rules? The real answer depends on what you care about as an investor. The Sharpe ratio is the industry standard for a reason. It's a fantastic all-rounder for a quick look at overall risk-adjusted performance. But the Sortino ratio is superior. For a more conservative investor who is primarily focused on capital preservation and avoiding losses, it gives you a more accurate picture of how you are compensated for the risk you actually dread. For the most complete picture of a portfolio's performance, the best approach is to use both. They don't compete, they just complement each other.